Introduction Overview of The Stranger. Albert Camus' The Stranger is a classic work of existentialism and absurdism, examining the life of a man who, seemingly devoid of emotions, is condemned not so much for the crime he commits, but for his detachment from societal norms. Written in 1942, The Stranger centers on the protagonist, Meursault, and explores themes of alienation, absurdity, freedom, and the arbitrary nature of life and death. The novel is often interpreted as a reflection of Camus' philosophy of the absurd, which argues that life has no inherent meaning, and human efforts to find meaning are in vain. Camus' work challenges the conventional notions of morality, justice, and human connection, presenting a protagonist who is emotionally indifferent to life and to the values imposed by society. The story raises questions about how one should live in a world without higher purpose, offering readers a profound meditation on the human condition. Chapter 1: The Death of Meursault's Mother. The novel opens with one of the most famous lines in literary history: "Mother died today. Or maybe yesterday, I can't be sure." This introduction sets the tone for Meursault's detached and indifferent view of life. Meursault learns of his mother's death from a telegram sent by the nursing home where she lived. His reaction to this significant event is cold and dispassionate. He attends the funeral, but he is more concerned with the heat of the day, his physical discomfort, and the long, tedious procession than with the loss of his mother. Meursault does not cry at the funeral, and he observes the mourners without engaging emotionally with the event. Key concepts. 1. Absurdism. Meursault's indifference to his mother's death introduces Camus' philosophy of absurdism, which posits that life has no inherent meaning and human emotions, such as grief, are arbitrary responses imposed by societal expectations. 2. Detachment from social norms. Meursault's reaction is shocking to those around him because society expects mourning and displays of emotion at the death of a loved one. His failure to conform to these norms sets him apart from society and foreshadows his eventual alienation. Important quotes. 1. "Mother died today, or maybe yesterday, I can't be sure." This opening line captures the essence of Meursault's character: detached, indifferent, and unconcerned with the conventions of time and emotion. His inability to pinpoint the day of his mother's death signifies a deeper emotional distance from life itself. 2. "It occurred to me that anyway one more Sunday was over, that Maman was buried now, that I was going back to work, and that, really, nothing had changed." Meursault's indifference to the death of his mother highlights his existential apathy. To him, the passing of time and events is inconsequential, further emphasizing the absurdity of life. Key lessons. Life's meaninglessness. Meursault's lack of grief reflects Camus' belief in the absurdity of life. His failure to ascribe meaning to death suggests that life itself is arbitrary and devoid of higher purpose. Societal expectations versus individual experience. The disconnect between Meursault's personal experience of his mother's death and society's expectations of how one should behave in such situations challenges the notion of universal moral and emotional responses. Chapter 2: Meursault's relationship with Marie. After returning from the funeral, Meursault resumes his routine, showing no signs of grief or sorrow. The next day, he begins a romantic relationship with Marie, a former co-worker. They spend time swimming at the beach, eating, and engaging in a physical relationship. Despite Marie's affection for him, Meursault remains emotionally indifferent. When she asks if he loves her, he responds honestly that he does not, though he enjoys her company and the physical pleasure she provides. Key concepts. 1. Existentialism and freedom. Meursault's approach to relationships reflects existential freedom, where one acts without the constraints of emotional obligation. He enjoys life's pleasures in the present moment, without considering deeper emotional connections or future commitments. 2. The physical versus emotional. Meursault is focused on physical sensations, swimming, eating, and sex, rather than forming emotional attachments. This detachment represents his alienation from the human experiences that others deem significant. Important quotes. 1. Marie came that morning and asked me if I loved her. I told her it didn't mean anything but that I didn't think so. Meursault's blunt response to Marie's question about love reflects his emotional detachment and inability to connect deeply with others. To him, love is irrelevant, further highlighting his existential perspective. 2. I had a hard time waking up because I'd stayed up late watching a Fernando movie. This quote emphasizes Meursault's lack of emotional depth or concern for significant events. He mentions trivial details, such as watching a movie, instead of reflecting on his mother's recent death or his growing relationship with Marie. Key lessons. Emotional detachment. Meursault's indifference to love and relationships reveals a central theme of the novel: his existential apathy. He lives for the present, valuing sensory experiences over emotional bonds. Authenticity and freedom. Meursault's refusal to lie about his feelings to Marie, even when society would expect him to, showcases his commitment to authenticity. He does not conform to social expectations, instead choosing to live in accordance with his own truth, however indifferent it may be. Chapter 3: The Neighbor and the Concept of Choice. Meursault's interactions with his neighbors, particularly Raymond, further develop the theme of moral indifference. Raymond, a violent and manipulative character, becomes friendly with Meursault. He asks Meursault to help him write a letter to his mistress, with the intention of luring her back so he can humiliate her. Meursault agrees to help, without giving much thought to the morality of the situation. His passive acceptance of Raymond's request exemplifies his indifference to the ethical implications of his actions. Key concepts. 1. Moral ambiguity. Meursault does not evaluate his actions based on moral judgments. He helps Raymond not out of friendship or a sense of justice, but simply because he sees no reason not to. This lack of concern for right and wrong underlines his existential detachment from society's moral code. 2. Indifference to consequences. Meursault's choices are not guided by their consequences. He does not care about the potential harm his actions might cause, reflecting his belief that life and its outcomes is inherently meaningless. Important quotes. 1. He asked me if I thought he'd been punished enough, and I said I didn't think so. Meursault's response to Raymond's inquiry shows his disinterest in moral judgment. He does not care whether Raymond is guilty or innocent, good or bad. He simply provides an indifferent answer. 2. I said I didn't mind if he was my friend. This quote illustrates Meursault's emotional detachment. He does not actively seek friendships, nor does he reject them. His relationship with Raymond is based on convenience rather than any real emotional connection. Key lessons. Moral indifference. Meursault's interactions with Raymond highlight his lack of a moral compass. His choices are based on indifference rather than ethical considerations, suggesting that morality is subjective and meaningless in an absurd universe. Choice without consequence. Meursault's passive involvement in Raymond's schemes reflects a broader existential lesson that human actions do not inherently carry meaning or moral weight. This detachment from consequences underscores Camus' philosophy of the absurd. Chapter 4: The Beach and the Murder. In one of the most pivotal scenes of the novel, Meursault, Marie, Raymond, and a few others go to the beach. While there, they encounter a group of Arabs, including the brother of Raymond's mistress, who has a grudge against Raymond. After a tense confrontation, Meursault later returns to the beach alone. Under the oppressive heat of the sun, he finds the Arab man near a spring. In a moment of seeming randomness, Meursault shoots the Arab once, then fires 4 more times into the lifeless body. The murder is senseless and unprovoked, reflecting the novel's central theme of absurdity. Meursault cannot provide a rational explanation for why he killed the man. The heat, the sun, and the blinding light are all factors that Meursault mentions, but none of them justify his actions. Key concepts. 1. The absurd. The murder is the ultimate expression of the absurd in the novel. Meursault's action lacks motivation or meaning. It is a random, irrational act that highlights the absurdity of human existence. 2. Alienation. The murder isolates Meursault from society. His inability to explain his actions and the lack of rational motive further alienate him from the norms and values of the world around him. Important quotes. 1. And it was like knocking 4 quick times on the door of unhappiness. This haunting line reflects Meursault's indifferent attitude toward the murder. His description of the act is devoid of emotion, emphasizing the absurdity of his crime and his disconnection from the consequences. 2. The sun was the same as it had been the day I'd buried Maman, and like then, my forehead especially was hurting me. Meursault's comparison of the murder to his mother's funeral reveals his existential view of life. Both events, significant to others, are trivial and discomforting to him, further emphasizing the meaninglessness of human actions. Key lessons. The absurdity of life and death. The senselessness of the murder reflects the broader absurdity of life itself. Meursault's actions are not governed by rationality, morality, or logic, underscoring the unpredictability and irrationality of human existence. Alienation from society. Meursault's detachment from societal norms and his inability to explain his crime highlight his alienation. He is an outsider, living according to his own existential beliefs, separate from the moral and social frameworks that govern others. Chapter 5. The Trial. During Meursault's trial, the focus is not on the murder itself, but on Meursault's character. The prosecutor and the defense lawyer both emphasize Meursault's behavior at his mother's funeral, using it as evidence of his moral failings. His lack of grief, his emotional detachment, and his refusal to conform to societal expectations become the central points of the trial. The prosecutor argues that Meursault's indifference makes him a danger to society, and he is ultimately condemned more for his emotional detachment than for the murder itself. Key concepts. 1. Judgment and society. The trial reflects society's need to impose meaning and morality on individuals. Meursault is judged not for his crime, but for his refusal to adhere to social norms of emotion and morality. 2. The absurdity of justice. The trial highlights the absurdity of human justice, which seeks to impose rational explanations and moral judgments on a world that Camus suggests is inherently irrational and meaningless. Important quotes. 1. For everything to be consummated, for me to feel less alone, I had only to wish that there be a large crowd of spectators the day of my execution and that they greet me with cries of hate. This quote reveals Meursault's alienation and his acceptance of his fate. He recognizes that his execution is a societal judgment, but he remains indifferent, finding solace in the absurdity of it all. 2. He said that I had no place in a society whose most fundamental rules I ignored. The prosecutor's statement captures the central conflict of the novel. Meursault's failure to conform to societal rules of behavior and emotion makes him an outsider, unfit to live within the boundaries of society. Key lessons. The absurdity of human justice. The trial serves as a metaphor for the absurdity of human attempts to impose meaning on an inherently meaningless world. Meursault's condemnation is not for his actions, but for his refusal to conform to societal norms. Conformity and alienation. Meursault's alienation from society is complete by the end of the trial. His failure to conform to social expectations of grief, love, and morality ultimately leads to his downfall, underscoring the existential tension between individual freedom and societal conformity. Chapter 6. Meursault's reflections on death and the absurd. In the final chapter, as Meursault awaits his execution, he reflects on life, death, and the meaning of existence. He comes to terms with the inevitability of his death, recognizing that, just as life has no inherent meaning, neither does death. He realizes that all humans are condemned to die, and the timing and circumstances of death are irrelevant. This acceptance of the absurd gives him a sense of peace. Meursault embraces the randomness of life and death, finding freedom in the acknowledgement that nothing truly matters. Key concepts. 1. Acceptance of the absurd. Meursault's reflections on death encapsulate Camus' philosophy of the absurd. He recognizes that life is meaningless, and in this realization, he finds a sense of freedom and peace. 2. Freedom in acceptance. By accepting the absurdity of life and the inevitability of death, Meursault gains a sense of freedom. He no longer feels the need to conform to societal expectations or seek meaning in life, as he understands that there is none. Important quotes. 1. I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world. This quote encapsulates Meursault's final realization: the world is indifferent to human life, and it is futile to seek meaning in a universe that offers none. This acceptance of indifference allows Meursault to find peace in his final moments. 2. I had lived my life one way, and I could just as well have lived it another. Meursault's reflection on his life emphasizes the absurdity of existence. He acknowledges that his choices and actions were arbitrary, and that life could have unfolded in countless different ways, none of which would have mattered in the end. Key lessons. The absurdity of existence. Meursault's acceptance of life's absurdity reflects the central existential lesson of the novel that life has no inherent meaning, and humans must confront this reality to find freedom. Freedom through acceptance. Meursault's peace at the end of the novel comes from his acceptance of the absurd. By embracing the meaninglessness of life and the inevitability of death, he is able to live and die on his own terms, free from societal expectations and judgments. Conclusion. The philosophy of the stranger. The Stranger is a powerful exploration of existentialism and absurdism. Through the character of Meursault, Camus challenges the reader to confront the meaninglessness of life and the arbitrary nature of societal norms and moral judgments. Meursault's journey from emotional detachment to acceptance of the absurd mirrors the existential struggle to find meaning in a world that offers none. Camus' novel raises profound questions about the nature of existence, morality, and freedom. Meursault's refusal to conform to social expectations and his ultimate acceptance of the absurd offer a unique perspective on how to live in a world without inherent meaning. In the end, The Stranger presents a radical vision of freedom, suggesting that true liberation comes not from conforming to society's rules, but from accepting life's inherent absurdity and living authentically in the face of it.